In 2013, Nintendo was struggling financially. The Wii U was not doing well. And while the 3DS was recovering from its awful launch and starting to sell decently, the relatively cheap handheld couldn't hold the entire company on its back for very long. So, in order to drum up interest in their games and consoles, and also celebrate one of their beloved characters, Nintendo decided that year, 2013, would be the year of Luigi. 2013 had marked exactly 30 years since Luigi's introduction in 1983 in the Mario Bros. Arcade game. And after 30 years of never having any other years of Luigi for the character's other year milestones, they decided that now would be the time to finally give him the spotlight. And while the year of Luigi wasn't exactly a success,
Mamma mia!
it did see the launch of a bunch of Luigi-centered games. We got New Super Luigi U, Dr. Luigi, Mario & Luigi Dream Team, and a sequel to a game most had thought would never receive one, Luigi's Mansion 2. This game has an interesting reputation, with some claiming it to be a gem stuck on the 3DS, while others see it as a complete departure from what made the original Luigi's Mansion good. And not in a positive way like how Luigi's Mansion 3 changed the series, while some just have no opinion on it because they've never been able to play it. But now with its re-release on Switch in the form of Luigi's Mansion 2, making it much more accessible, I decided to finally fully play through the game and really delve into it and try to answer the question that's been on my, and so many others' minds for the better part of 11 years now. Is Luigi's Mansion 2 bad? Initially released here in North America on March 24th, 2013, and later re-released in the form of an HD port on the Nintendo Switch on June 27th, 2024, Luigi's Mansion 2, originally known as Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon in North America, was a return to a series that had been dormant for almost 12 years at that point. I mean, when Luigi's Mansion 1 launched with the GameCube all the way back in 2001, people didn't really expect a sequel. The game released to okay reviews from critics and sold a decent amount considering the console it was on, but the whole thing seemed like a one and done deal. However, behind the scenes at Nintendo, things were pretty different. First off, during the game's development, and even shortly after, director Hideki Kono continuously floated the idea of having a glasses-free 3D mode for the game, as the GameCube was originally planned to have glasses-free 3D capability, with Kono even revisiting the GameCube's hardware after it was released to create a 3D prototype demo of Luigi's Mansion. However, at the time, this glasses-free 3D was far too expensive for Nintendo, and would have practically doubled the price of the console. Regardless of Kono's failed Luigi's Mansion 3D project though, the idea of a Luigi's Mansion sequel was constantly thrown around, specifically due to the Poltergust, which a lot of people at Nintendo thought was super fun to use, and allowed for really cool and creative puzzle design. However, each time this idea was brought up, it wouldn't get anywhere. That was until Nintendo started work on the successor to the extremely popular DS. With this new console, Nintendo realized they could finally integrate the glasses-free 3D they had dreamed about with the GameCube. And because of this, also realized it was finally time for that Luigi's Mansion sequel they'd been wanting to make for quite a while. So, shortly after official work started on the 3DS in 2009, Nintendo reached out to Canadian developer Next Level Games, who had previously worked on the Mario Strikers games and Punch-Out for the Wii. And according to an Iwata Asks interview, surprised them with the idea that they would be making Luigi's Mansion 2, with the whole studio being shocked but really excited to work on the project. Therefore beginning its just over 3-year development time, spanning from mid-2009 to late 2012, and kicking off the Year of Luigi celebrations with its release in 2013. Upon opening the game for the first time, you're greeted to this cutscene of Professor Egad from the first game working on something, with a ghost behind him who seems to be sneaking up on him, but is actually just saying hi. Before it's revealed that Egad has a whole array of friendly ghosts helping him out in this lab. Unfortunately though, the friendly demeanor these ghosts carry doesn't last for long, as we see King Boo heading toward the dark moon in the sky and shattering it into pieces, causing the once calm ghosts to suddenly become aggressive and start lashing out, absolutely destroying the lab, with Egad hightailing it out of there. After that, we then fade into a shot outside of Luigi's house, which is actually the D-rank mansion from Luigi's 1. I guess confirming the canon rank ending of that game. Inside the house, we see Luigi sound asleep in front of the TV, before it suddenly turns to static, slowly awaking him and causing him to approach the glitching TV. A scene oddly reminiscent of an iconic scene from the film Poltergeist, which this cutscene is clearly referencing, before Egad shows up on the TV, begging for Luigi's help with the ghost's outbreak. Before, without Luigi's permission, begins sucking him into the TV with his new invention, the Pixelator, and dragging him to his underground lab, forcing him to set out after the Poltergeist 5000, so that Luigi can start catching ghosts and find all the pieces of the shattered Dark Moon. This opening is pretty cool, actually. I love the Poltergeist reference with Luigi approaching the TV, and the concept of the Dark Moon keeping the ghosts in line, and the goal of the game being to repair the moon is a great way to switch things up instead of just having Mario be kidnapped again. But we'll return to that later. Overall, a great way to set up the game. Apart from Mario not being the driving point of the initial story, the game also has two big differences gameplay-wise from its GameCube predecessor. And that's the mission-based structure of the game, and the fact that there are multiple mansions you explore instead of just one. The mission-based structure of the game is almost immediately apparent as soon as the opening cutscenes end, as Egad sends you on your first mission, A-1 Poltergeist 5000, outlining the world and level structure the missions have in this game. This structure is already an incredibly big departure from the first game, as Luigi's Mansion 1 just kinda threw you in the mansion, and only really pulled you out after you completed a major objective like defeating the boss of that area. This kind of structure 2 goes for can really be a double-edged sword in a lot of ways. On one hand, the missions allow you to endlessly replay certain sections of the game instead of having to create a new save file and get to that specific area you wanted to play again, and also lets you be able to speedrun each mission individually and go for the fastest time possible to get a higher ranking. But on the other hand, it can really pull you out of the game, physically and figuratively. On the physical side, you are genuinely constantly being pulled out of the mission and put back in, making it annoying if you planned on exploring a certain area but were pulled out and have to trek all the way back there. And on the figuratively side, this can really affect immersion, as it doesn't feel like you're exploring the mansion on your own terms, rather exploring it the way the game wants you to, which can be super annoying and really takes away a lot of what people enjoyed about the first game. And on the topic of immersion, along with the annoying amount of times you're pulled out of the mansion by Egad, he also calls you constantly on this game's Game Boy horror equivalent, the dual screen. And while the ringtone that plays when he calls you is a banger, it's not very fun to consistently be bothered by this bald old man, telling you things you most likely already know or would have been more fun to figure out on your own. This calling issue does get better in the later parts of the game, but especially at the beginning in Gloomy Manor, it feels like he stops you after each new step you take to tell you what you need to do next. I mean, at this point, if he wants you to do each thing in his specific way, he should get his old bald ass out of the lab and go do it himself. Jokes aside though, while I do get annoyed by Egad's constant interruption at the beginning, Gloomy Manor is a fantastic way to start the game. As soon as you're zapped outside the manor on your first mission to get the Poltergeist, it immediately gives those classic Luigi's Mansion 1 vibes as you make your way through the front yard to the door. I really like how while Luigi's Mansion 1 wants to be different than the first and explore a lot of different themes through its different locations, it still starts everything off familiar to what fans of the first game would expect, before becoming something completely unique and different later on. To this day, Gloomy Manor is still one of my favorite locations in the series. I feel it combines that classic Luigi's Mansion vibe with the new cartoony art style that 2 brought to the series, and is a great merge of the 2 different atmospheres. And the music here does a stellar job at getting this point across. It has that classic Luigi's Mansion spooky vibe, but not in a creepy way like the first game's music did, instead in a more lighthearted way. This isn't the music I'd imagine would play in a super scary haunted house designed to creep you out and have you on edge. Rather, the music I'd imagine playing in a Scooby-Doo-esque haunted house. And the absolutely downright goofy traps the ghosts have in this house, like the stairs disappearing causing Luigi to slide all the way down flat on his face, furthers that sentiment as well. And speaking of the goofy traps the ghosts place throughout the mansions, I really want to touch on how outstanding of a job this game does at bringing the characters to life. Luigi's Mansion 1 was a great game, but it didn't do all that much in the cutscene and animation department, and that was perfectly fine at the time. However, with Luigi's Mansion 2, the team really took this game's animations and cutscenes to the next level. Get it? Because they're called next level games. The way Luigi is brought to life in this game is remarkable, and brings the biggest smile to my face. From Luigi blinding himself with the flashlight while trying to check out the new upgrade he got, to waving to himself and laughing as he tests out a portal with his hand. It's also full of life and charm, and really is a super cute and super great way to celebrate his character. Even scared out of his mind, Luigi is still his whimsical self, joking around and entertaining himself. I love it. And these hilariously well done animations and cutscenes aren't just limited to Luigi. Egad, and especially the ghosts, have tons of funny interactions and moments as well. With one of my favorites being these two ghosts literally reenacting a scene from Frankenstein. It's so unserious, but that's what makes them so great in the first place. These all lend super well to the cartoony nature of the game, and just like we see in Luigi's Mansion 3, make the whole thing feel like you're literally playing a cartoon. I know I say that a lot about these games, but it's true. So many things that go on in this game just feel like I'm playing a cartoon like Scooby-Doo, and that level of charm really sticks with you. Next Level Games did a fantastic job bringing the world of this game to life, and by far is one of my favorite aspects of it. I mean, just look at this ghost hiding in the mummy, that's so good. On the topic of characters though, while I was just extensively praising this game for its great animation work, one thing I cannot praise it for is its characters. The original Luigi's Mansion had an insane variety of unique characters. You had the introduction of King Boo and Professor Egad, but also 23 unique boss ghosts. Each one of these guys were distinct in their own way, and I really loved how different they were from the regular ghosts you would encounter around the mansion. And even though you didn't spend much time around them, most of them had a unique personality and gave them a lot more life than the basic ghosts around the place. In Luigi's Mansion 2 though, you don't really have that at all, with all of the major bosses of the game being the Possessor Ghosts, who possess inanimate objects and hide in them during fights. And while this idea would be cool for maybe one or two bosses, I really missed the more unique humanoid ghosts we saw in Luigi's Mansion 1, and really enjoyed seeing them return in 3. The most unique boss ghost in this game isn't even a boss ghost, it's Polterpup, who we love, by the way. I think Luigi's Mansion 3 handled the idea of possessing an inanimate object really well with its piano fight, but more importantly, its T-Rex fight. This fight sees you for the first half facing off against a giant T-Rex fossil, until it's revealed that it was being possessed, but not just by any regular ghost. It's being possessed by a caveman ghost, which you fight in the second half, and I love that. I think this game could have really profited off more creative ideas like that for the bosses at the end of each mansion. And while on the subject of the different mansions, let's talk about them. Luigi's Mansion 2 is the only game in the series to feature more than one main location for Luigi to explore. While 1 had you explore its mysterious and ominous mansion, and 3 had you explore its absolutely giant hotel boasting tons of floors, Luigi's Mansion 2 spreads things out across 5 different mansions. You got Gloomy Manor, Haunted Towers, Old Clockwork, Secret Mine, and Treacherous Mansion. And while I already praised Gloomy Manor for being one of my favorite locations in the series, the rest of the mansions here are still great. Haunted Towers has this greenhouse theme, and while this game isn't nearly as creepy as the first, exploring around this place in its dilapidated state was really cool and I loved the atmosphere. It looked like a bunch of failed experiment rooms that you'd see in a post-apocalyptic game or something. The funniest part about this mansion though is the final boss. You see, your whole time here sees you trying to get inside of this giant tree in the center and retrieve the Dark Moon piece. But once you do, you're met with probably the most annoying boss fight in the game. These stairs. What you're supposed to do is go up the staircases with the torches not lit, but it's almost impossible to memorize each one before the torches all go out, so you'll most likely be spending a lot of time here. Moving on, Old Clockworks is this abandoned factory, and has some of the coolest puzzles in the game, and was probably my favorite mansion to explore out of the 5. Secret Mine, like the name suggests, is a mine hidden beneath a log cabin, and the atmosphere here is amazing. The music combined with the design and detail of this place really left an impression on me. My main issue with it though is that it has the least amount of missions of any other mansion in the game. I really wish I could have spent more time here. It felt like it ended way too soon. And the final mansion of the game, Treacherous Mansion, was actually a lot cooler than I expected. This one returns to the classic mansion style of Gloomy Manor, but does it in a much different way. The whole place is a museum with a bunch of different exhibits. and the puzzles in it revolve around making clever use of the items and elements in those exhibits, and bringing them to each other to solve the puzzles. The one big thing I will commend the Treacherous Mansion for, though, compared to the others, is its openness. The game doesn't really hold your hand at all in the missions that take place here, and I really like that. It genuinely felt like I was exploring this place and brought back the feeling of exploring the different rooms in Luigi's Mansion 1. In the end, the multiple mansions of this game do feel like a cop-out to be able to stick to the whole mansion theme, while also being able to explore different themes. But it doesn't really bother me all that much, because you can tell there was a lot of thought and care put into these different locations. And they're still a blast to explore. And that sentiment of the locations being a blast to explore while still having their flaws is kind of like the thesis of this game. Luigi's Mansion 2 may not have the atmosphere or level of uniqueness of the first, and it may not have the incredible graphics and new concepts of 3, but damn is it still so fun to play. And that's something I want to talk about. This game is just such a blast to play. During development, the team changed the control scheme almost like 8 times. And you can really tell they spent a lot of time refining it, because controlling Luigi just feels really good here. Along with that, collecting gold and sucking up ghosts feels even better. I love charging up the meter while sucking up the ghosts, and quickly pressing A to blast away huge chunks of their health. It's in my opinion the most satisfying poltergeist controls in this series. The gems hidden in each mansion are also a ton of fun to find too, with a lot of them making clever use of the new dark light mechanic, which sees you scanning around for objects that have been made invisible by the booze. Some of these are pretty bullshit and see you kind of just randomly scanning and finding one, but a lot of the more important ones see you noticing little out of place things in a room and dark lighting them back into existence. For all the hate this game gets for not being as good as the others in some aspects, it really needs to be recognized that this game is just plain old fun, and it's important for a video game to do that. It may not be perfect in all aspects, but it's good where it counts. And before I head into the final boss of this game, the one last thing I wanted to talk about quickly is the Switch remaster. When this was announced, I and many others were cautiously excited. On one hand, I was super surprised to see them bringing this to Switch, and really excited to finally have a reason to fully play through it, as I thought it would be fun to experience it on the Switch. But on the other hand, regardless of its title of Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, it didn't look all that different from how it looked on the 3DS. I mean, just look at Metroid Prime Remastered, which released just a couple months before this was announced. That game was a proper and full remaster of one of the most popular GameCube games, and wasn't even full price, only being $40 American compared to Nintendo's usual price of $60. Then look back at 2 HD. This looked like a lazily upscaled port of a 3DS game that they were just gonna sell for $60 to make a quick buck. And looking back, we were kind of right. This game did end up being full priced, and while when looking at this side by side with the 3DS game, it is very clear that there was a lot of work done to improve the textures and graphics, it still doesn't even come close to living up to 3's visuals. So while this is the definitive way to play the game, with it controlling and looking a bit better on Switch, it still is a little embarrassing for this game to be full priced when first of all it wasn't even that expensive on the 3DS, and second of all a game like Metroid Prime Remastered exists for a much cheaper price and is actually remastered. Enough about prices and graphics though. I think it's time we get into the main villain and final boss of this game, King Boo. You remember when I said earlier the whole point of this game wasn't to rescue Mario and instead was all about restoring the Dark Moon so that the ghost would return to being nice? Well, that is how it's initially presented to the player, but as you get further into the game, you slowly start to realize that that isn't all that you're doing. And eventually through hints and then finally a full reveal that Mario is kidnapped, the main goal of the game also becomes saving Mario. This feels like a really weird twist because I think collecting the pieces of the Dark Moon was a compelling enough story, but it doesn't really bother me. Anyway, after realizing Mario is kidnapped, Luigi tries to track down King Boo and the final Dark Moon piece to restore peace to Evershade Valley and also rescue Mario. This leads into the final boss fight of the game. The fight begins with this really cool sequence of Luigi being sucked back through the pixelator after completing a mission, and being forced to be face to face with King Boo as he tries to take care of Luigi once and for all. This fight sees you avoiding King Boo's various attacks and trying to stun him by having giant spike balls land on his head. What is with this guy and giant spike balls? Anyway, after each time of successfully stunning King Boo and draining his health, you're brought into these really cool chase sequences where you have to act super quickly on your feet in order to avoid getting hit by him rolling towards you in King Ball form. This fight is honestly super cool, and I vastly prefer it over 1's final fight. There are so many cool ideas here, and it's not too hard that it becomes annoying, but also not too easy where I feel bored. It's just the right amount of difficulty in my opinion. And so after successfully draining King Boo's health enough, you're finally able to suck him up, bringing a beautiful end to an amazing game. Luigi's Mansion 2, or Luigi's Dark Moon as a lot of people know it as, is a game that kind of became forgotten with time. That is until it was ported to Switch. And after finally playing through and beating it, I don't understand why. Sure, this game has its fair share of issues, it's not perfect in the slightest, but there are so many fun aspects of it, and it really was a game that I couldn't put down till I beat it. I had so much fun exploring the many different mansions of this game and solving the super unique puzzles each one had. This game introduced so many new ideas to the series that it doesn't get nearly enough credit for. I mean, for one, we have the blacklight mechanic, which allows for so many unique puzzle opportunities, and who can forget about Scare Scraper? Bringing multiplayer to Luigi's Mansion is such a goofy idea, but it's done so well and adds almost endless replayability to the game. Luigi's Mansion 2 may not be a perfect game, hell, to some it may not even be a great game, but at the end of the day, this is a title that did an amazing job at bringing the Luigi's Mansion series back to life. And if it weren't for this game and a bunch of its ideas and concepts, we would have never gotten Luigi's Mansion 3. So to finally answer the question posed at the very beginning of this video, is Luigi's Mansion 2 bad? I don't think so. This is a game that, despite its flaws, deserves to be remembered, and one I would very much recommend giving a try if you can get past its not so great price.